Hello and welcome. It's really great to be back with this second installment of the Fyne conference, celebrating all the new and exciting things happening in our community. Thanks to everybody who's joined us live today. I hope that you'll find the presentations enjoyable, educational, and perhaps even a little inspiring. We've got quite a packed schedule today, as you can see. Each of our speakers is going to be connecting live from their home, so please excuse the short breaks between each talk. If you've got any questions that you would like to ask, please use the live chat alongside our video feed, our Twitter channel, or the Fyne channel on the Gophers Slack server. Most of these are linked from our website if you're not already a member. We'll try to address questions during each session, but if we miss you, then don't worry, but come and join us in the question and answer session at the end of the event. We're going to run through a number of presentations today. We're starting with a welcome and what's new in the 1.3 release of Fyne. And then there's going to be a live coding session showing how easy it is to build your first Fyne app. Then I'm very excited to say that we've got some guest speakers. Jacob is going to be presenting his project Sparta, the private way to keep track of exercise. And then Stephen will be presenting the FyneDesk project, its latest release, and the future roadmap. We'll take a short break in the middle, allow everybody a chance to take a moment, and then start again with a discussion about how to handle cross-platform file I/O and resource handling. After that, Anthony has agreed to join us to talk about his high-level Canvas API for the Fyne toolkit, which has got some really great looking graphs in there, so you won't want to miss that. And we'll have a presentation about the FyneTerm project and a discussion about terminal emulation. We'll wrap up with a short presentation about the road ahead and the 2.0 release that we're hoping to bring later in the year. And then, like I said, there'll be a question and answer with the team and anybody who would like to join us. The link is on our website and will be presented on the slides just before. I would love to take a moment just now to thank our speakers. Andy Williams, that's me, Anthony Starks, Jacob Althen, and Stephen Houston are going to be joining us later on. I'm so appreciative of their time and the project that they've put together that they will be presenting on. Also, a massive thank you to all of our contributors and community members who built the cool things that you'll see today. We are lucky enough to have over, I think, 50 contributors on the project, and they have just done a phenomenal amount of work to make the 1.3 release possible, everything leading up to it, and also quite a lot of exciting work in progress as well. Also, I would like to thank our sponsors. Without you, it would not be possible for this project to run. There's too many to list just now, but you can find a list of them on our website. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions. And now, before I give you the tantalizing details of the 1.3 release, I thought it would be a good idea to have a quick recap on the Fyne project vision. We aim to be the best toolkit for easily developing beautiful native graphical applications across all platforms. Now, there are many different platforms out there, some old, some new, all targeting slightly different use cases, platforms. And we've spoken a number of times in the past about why we think it was time to create a new project. And it is our hope that we've created something here that is very easy to develop with, to learn quickly, to build your applications and to deploy across all of the graphical operating systems that are currently available for development. But more than just that aspiration, what does a good project look like? So, to be easy to learn and to discover the functionality, a project really needs to be idiomatic with the language it's written for and the systems it's targeting. The APIs that developers are going to be working with should be completely straightforward, no surprises hidden around the corners, and this code should be self-documenting as well. The Go language is a really great opportunity for this. The documentation is clear, and the community sites where this can be found are all very readily available and signposted. A good toolkit should also have a clean and simple architecture, something that a first-time contributor can get into, understand very easily, and see how they can contribute without too much trouble. It should also be extensible. A set of widgets is something that should be clean and simple, consistent, but it shouldn't stop people doing things that they would like to, or where their specifications need something different. So we should make sure that all of the built-in components are extensible for developers that want to make that additional functionality. We have chosen the material design specification to follow our designs. It's more of an inspiration than an absolute rule book, but there's some really great information in there, so we try to use that as much as possible. Also, in this day and age, with lots of different types of screens, pixel densities, configurations, it only really makes sense to have a vector-based toolkit, which means that your graphics are going to look great on any screen. And so that's one of the principles that we think is really, really important for a modern graphical toolkit. We know also that some people prefer light themes, some people prefer dark themes. So we're going to make sure, going all the way through the project, that both of these are readily available and that anything in the main toolkit is going to look great on both. Obviously, also a consistent user experience should lead a comfortable flow through any application, and also be familiar enough that a user doesn't have to ask questions about how an application would work, look for documentation. It should be really straightforward. And lastly, a technical one here. We don't want developers to have to worry about any dependencies when they're installing an application, so no runtime dependencies at all. Now, it's not really possible to have absolutely none. You do need a graphics driver set up and running, but outside of that, we're saying that there's nothing that's going to be required for the end user. That does mean that some developers might need to install a few additional tools to be able to compile them, but it's just a one-time setup, and that means that there's no challenges for the distribution. Also, what platforms is this currently available on? Well, if you've been following the project up to now, you'll know that in the 1.2 release, we managed to include mobile support as well. And so now Android and iOS mobile platforms, Linux, macOS, and Windows desktop are all first-class citizens and fully supported all of the functionality that is in the project that you'll see today, unless otherwise noted for some work in progress reasons. We also have support for BSD Unix and the Chromebook. These are both running well, but we don't currently have them on our day-to-day test pipeline, so we know that maybe not 100% is there, but we're working on it. And if you were thinking about deploying to systems which have perhaps touchscreens on a desktop computer or physical keyboards on a mobile device, we know that there's some areas there for improvement. It works really well on some systems, and then others perhaps not. If you find one that's not working great, then do get in touch. The more devices that we can test on, the more quickly we can bring that into the fully supported category. So there we go with a quick overview of the Fyne project, what we're trying to achieve and what it is currently available on. There'll obviously be much more details later on, but I would like to move on to the current release, version 1.3, what is in it. This release was out about a week ago and represented a huge amount of work from the community. We've had some really great feedback, very positive so far. Thanks to everybody who's got in touch. Whether you love it or you think that something that could be better, it's really valuable for us to know what you feel about it, how it's working, and where you would like to be building beyond what we already have. Today, I would like to just highlight some of the exciting feature additions that we have added in this version, along with some important changes that you probably need to know about if you're looking at some of this functionality, or if you have an application that was built on 1.2 and are curious about whether the upgrade is going to catch you out at all. This is a fully backwards compatible upgrade, so there's nothing that won't work, but there are some changes that you might need to be aware of. We'll cover that briefly in a moment. The biggest feature addition for 1.3 was file dialogues. Finally, there is a way inside a Fyne application to open and save to files that the user specifies. As you can see, it's a really nice interface. It's straightforward but has the functionality that you would expect. I love what's happened there with the icons. Stephen worked really hard to bring a little detail and delight into the user interface, which really just makes a difference. The picker that you see will be presented on any desktop computer. On mobile devices, you'll probably see something different, a native picker of some sort that is part of the operating system. Those vary from platform to platform. There are certain standards that the Android system holds, and the iOS similarly is going to present something more often. It will depend on the applications that you have installed and the configuration of your platform, so I don't want to get into the details there. If you're looking to open a file, then you will probably use the new Show File Open dialog. The code you can see is presented just here. We pass into this function a callback that will return either a URI read closer that represents the content of the file that has been opened, or an error because somehow that wasn't possible. If you are using this function, obviously it's important to check the error callback, make sure that there was no problems encountered. Here we're opening a new error dialog if something happens, though you might want to do something smarter depending on why the file was being opened. And the details of how to work with files here is hidden behind File Opened, but we'll talk more about that in one of the later presentations today. Unfortunately, the save is not currently available on iOS and Android. There are certain complexities around exactly what you can write to, where data can be sent to on the mobile platforms. It will become available, but we really wanted to get this dialogue and the functionality and workflow out into the community to gather some feedback before we really committed too much more to how that might work to add save support. So feel free to let us know what you think, and we'll be adding it shortly. Next up is notifications. Now, obviously no mobile app would be complete without notification support, but also more we're seeing them on the desktop as the ability to present operating system standard notifications is becoming abundant across multiple platforms. If you've worked with these before, you might be aware of the complexities of the APIs, how they vary. So we thought it was important to have one really simple way to present notifications on any system. So here you can see at the top right we have a Linux distribution. Actually it's FyneDesk showing you a notification. The middle one there is Mac OS, and then underneath we have the iOS version of the same notification. The code snippet there is showing you just how simple it is to put a little bit of content with a title into the system. The toolkit is going to use the icon and the application name associated with your app at runtime to fill in the details for you. So that's how you get the nice output that you can see below. And also, as part of this 1.3, we have a whole ton of new widgets to add, which is very exciting. The team have been working really hard on these. A particular shout out to Stuart and Tilo, have worked really hard to bring some of these to you today. In alphabetical order, the first we have is the accordion widget. normally a little bit larger than this, but the image is taken from the widgets page at the bottom there that you can go and see for the full set of widgets available. It's helping to manage large amounts of content where you want to collapse a certain amount behind some headers, and the user could then open one of them at a time by tapping on the header. Next up is text grid. The advanced monospaced text display here is helping to create things like code editors or terminals, which we'll talk about later. It's got text styles and provides standard ways to present line numbers and the tabs and spaces inside your content. Select entry is a combination of the standard select widget where you can pick one from a list and the entry where the user can enter freeform. So here you can provide a standard list of items that can be selected from, but also give the user the opportunity to manually enter their specific value. And lastly, the split container. This allows you to divide a piece of content into two, and those can be resized left to right or up and down by the user dragging the divider, and also you can specify how much space should be made available on either side. We'll include that in the live code session that we do next. Also, we have an improved version of the user interface for the Fyne settings app. Now, I don't know how many people have used this app. It's pretty helpful. It was introduced in 1.2 to help users manage the global state for all Fyne applications, and it can be accessed using the go get command at the bottom there. These changes apply to all Fyne apps that are running or ones that will be loaded later. And the preview that we've added here is showing the actual size of text for the application. So when you choose a different size, the user interface rescales, but those previews stay true to what will be loaded if you choose that size. Normal here in the middle is matching the operating system setting. So an application that's loaded will now do much more work to be at the same size as your operating system. So with the standard settings on macOS or Windows, this is going to pick up your existing operating system configuration, and then you can choose bigger or smaller for your Fyne apps. Now, in addition to that, there is so much that I think we shouldn't be forgetting that came in as part of this release. We have a long list of things that were added, and a huge amount of these things came from community contributions, so thank you to everybody who was part of this. We've got support for text wrap, we've got splash windows available on desktop, image scale mode. This has made a real difference to how some retro graphics could look, and given the number of emulators and simulators that people have been using Fyne for, this just really makes those old graphics pop in a way that previously was just a little bit blurred around the edges. We've got submenus now, hover effects on the menus, and widgets can influence the cursor style on desktop, and some more advanced functionality for those people extending existing widgets as well. We've added some new test functionality as well. So if you're running unit tests on your system and you were finding that you were having to pick widgets, run methods on them, and then verify the content of the widget afterwards, well, we've got some built-in image testing now that means that you can just do that so much more easily. And of course, the ability to change the soft keyboard on mobile devices is pretty cool if you've got number fields or dates and so forth. All of these things are going to be expanded more going forward, but it was great to get that wrapped up with 1.3. Some of the changes I mentioned that I think are quite significant for a number of our developers. The first one is that we upgraded the underlying GLFW library. So if you were previously seeing deprecated warnings or strange issues to do with building, well, that might just be fixed. Most of them were wrapped up somehow in how the graphics were presented, and so the upgrade there made a big difference. We've also changed the way that rendering works so that when you move and resize a window, your content is going to continue to draw animations, or background events are going to update as you would expect. Some systems were not unfortunately working quite that well with the 1.2 release. Also, I'll pick out here that starting your application, that is calling app.run or window.show and run, is no longer supported in Go routines. It never really was, but in some systems it sort of worked. To be consistent, we've decided that that just isn't supported at all, so there's no surprise for people there. If you try to run your application that way now, it is going to panic on start. This was a tough decision for us because we don't think a library should panic ever, but in this instance, it's consistent. If you're launching in a way that we can't support, we consider this a critical failure and it's not going to be possible to boot your app. So just take that out of the Go routine and everything will be fine again. And relating to scale, Linux apps are now showing a little bit smaller text. We realized that most operating systems had headed on from the 96 DPI standard, and so we're reflecting that on the code because Linux works just a little bit differently in our driver. It gives a consistent user experience, so that settings app UI I showed you works just exactly as you would expect. And another number of other changes there regarding some potential security warnings. They were all minor, but it was nice to get them tidied up. And buffer sizes and things might just have hit people with really complex applications, so that should be a big improvement there. More than 50 other additional issues were fixed in there, and that may not seem like a huge amount, but some of those were very complex, and this release was more than 1,000 commits in total. That's a huge amount of work, especially when you consider that the project up to version 1.2.4 was only just over 2,000 commits. So that's a huge amount of extra effort above what was there before. So thanks everybody for your involvement. Now, alongside that release of the library, we have an updated developer site as well. We got a lot of feedback from the community that it was better to find a single place for documentation where it's all available with tutorials and examples for the toolkit, along with other possible snippets, maybe troubleshooting is something that you could find in there as well. We wanted also to finally version our API documentation. The standard websites out there that the Go project has are really fantastic for the latest version of everything, but we're aware that as the toolkit evolves, particularly as we look forward into the future, the possibility of breaking API changes down the road, we wanted to know that the documentation was clear for the version that you're using, and that allowed us to include release notes, change guidance if you're upgrading. There's a little document in there that will help you jump from one major version release to another, covering, I suppose, most of the little items that I've mentioned earlier today, but a couple of other nuggets that might be relevant to you. And there is way more to come there. We've got lots of good ideas and people who are well ready and raring to put more content into the developer site. I don't want to really tease too much about what's going in there, but just keep your eyes peeled. The site's going to flesh out, and if there is anything that you think that we've missed, if you think we could be doing better, or something that you find might even be broken in that new site, do just get in touch. We'd love to add lots more content, and as long as you're not wanting somebody to write your app for you, you might find that a common question turns into an example that is then put on the website to share with everybody else. Well, there you have a roundup of what's new in 1.3, what's happening in the community. I hope that's been helpful.